A very good afternoon to everyone. Uh, a PhD in computational physics, along with a professional law degree, has been a practitioner in the field of law, IT enabled education, and IT implementation. Drawing upon his experience in world class international institutions and having taught in various modes of face to face distance learning and technology enhanced training. He believes in the maxim that convergence between various media and technologies would fundamentally alter the way learning would be created, packaged, and delivered to learners. His current activities are all directed towards actual implementation of these new age educational initiatives. Professor Pant has been the Pro Vice Chancellor of Indira Gandhi National Open University and the faculty at IIT Kanpur, MLNR Engineering College, and the faculty and visiting professor at University of Western Ontario, Canada. He has been a visiting scientist to research centers in Italy, England, Germany, and Sweden, and has delivered international lectures with about 80 published papers to his credit. With his interest in law, backed with practicing of law in High Court, and his basic training in science and IT, Professor Pant has been particularly interested in the cyber law, patent and trademark issues, intellectual property right issues, etc., and has been involved with many activities, conferences, and on law and IT. Professor Pant has been member of Board of Governors, IIT Delhi, one-man committee to create the project report and legislation for Delhi IT-enabled Open University, advisor to the Delhi government on Asian Network of Major Cities, Project ANMC 21 Distance Learning Project, being pursued in association with Tokyo Metropolitan Government. Some of Professor Pant's key works include introduction of Keller Plan at IIT Kanpur, development of computer-supported learning systems and its implementation at IGNOU, computerization activities at the Indian representative of ETS USA for conduct of their TOEFL and GR examination in India, Sikkim and Nepal, design and implementation of student registration and evaluation methods as well as evaluation systems and procedures for testing and examination at the IGNOU. Associated with the project development as member committee for IIIT Allahabad. With his mission to create and implement new business opportunity in the area of e-learning and learning facilitation, Professor Pant has been promoted as Planet Edu Private Limited as its founder and chairman, along with a team of highly experienced and skilled professors from education and training, operations and IT and finance. I met Sir in Planet Edu only in 2012. Ladies and gentlemen, we rarely get this kind of an opportunity to listen to the words of great personality. Professor M.M. Pant, I considered it a great honor to welcome you on this virtual stage and please share your viewpoint on today's topic. Thank you so much, sir, to be here in this session.
So thank you, Bhavna, for those kind words of introduction. And I am delighted to be here. And I have been part of many sessions created by Dr. Priyadarshi Nayak, who's been, I don't know where he gets that energy from, where he's able to do so many events, so many seminars. I am often tired and I say, no, I won't come ever, so, and so on. And I especially want to So I'm not using any PowerPoint. I've said very often, power corrupts the politician and PowerPoint corrupts the academic. So I will not use PowerPoint. I will be in a conversation mode. I'll talk to you on various issues relating to what has been the theme of this thing, that learning for uncertain times. But I've also done something interesting, that because there is a lot of material around it, and if you just hear about it in a conversational mode, you may miss many things. I have written up a text about this and posted it in various places. So one of the places where it is at mmpant.com, where my blog is there. Then if you go to Twitter and you look for me, you will get a link to that. There is the link on Facebook also to that, on LinkedIn also, and therefore you can get the text from a number of places. So here you can concentrate on that, and I've requested Dr. Nayak to share those links with you after this talk is over. In fact, this talk is very interesting because the topic that first I got was emergency in education. And people of my age, when they hear of emergency, they're reminded of 1975, when everything is stopped and so on. And then it was education in emergency. And therefore, I chose the particular theme for myself as uncertain times. Actually, another thing which comes to mind immediately is that it is not only about emergency, but about urgency as well. There's a huge urgency in education as well. So what I want to share with you are a few thoughts about how this will unfold, what people are doing, what the future will look like. And that's why I made a kind of a blog of about 2,000 words, which you can read and take your time reading it. It also has links to a number of other things. But the first thing that I want to point out to, and these are my perspectives building on what others have said. You see, we are often worried when there is uncertainty or change. And this has been particularly serious because it began as a lockdown, which looked like for a few days, a couple of weeks, then it went on to months. And as you can see that we don't know how long and in what shape this will continue. The other thing is that the World Health Organization director has been saying that don't think this is the last pandemic. Pandemics will become a part of our lives, and we will have to be trained or accustomed and prepared for dealing with pandemics in the future. This time we were a little less prepared, but in future we will have to be more prepared. So, as I said, it looks as if it is very difficult, but I come from a background of physics, and I've seen the story the last time there was such an uncertainty. And if you talk to somebody who studied physics and you talk about uncertainty, he will immediately be reminded of what was called Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. After hundreds of years of science and especially physics being deterministic, so much so that when Archimedes said, when he discovered the principle of a lever, give me a place to stand on and I can move the earth. And when Newton discovered this force of gravitation and his equations and Newton's laws of motion, it was clear that if you just say what is the situation at a certain point of time, we will be able to tell you what will happen at a future point of time. It was almost becoming arrogantly confident that physicists could tell you almost everything. And then, like what is happening now, suddenly things started to, let's say, get disturbed. And Heisenberg, who got a Nobel Prize for this, actually propounded something called an uncertainty principle. And that is very interesting. That normally, if you say that you can't say something, you will be apologetic about it, you will be defensive about it. But here he's saying, no, that's the way nature works. Intrinsically, at a certain level, nature is uncertain, which does not mean it is random, etc., etc. It only says it is no longer deterministic. And what I'm trying to say is that, as many of you know, those who have known physics and even otherwise, so there was Max Planck, Niels Bohr, Albert Einstein, and all these over about a decade or so came up with a completely new thing called quantum mechanics. Now, from that uncertainty and quantum mechanics, we have all this that we are seeing today. All the mobile phones, all the transistors, all the chips, all the things that we are seeing is a result of quantum technologies. So uncertainty led to great stuff. And everything, in fact, most of the things that we are seeing today are based on quantum mechanics, which arose out of the uncertainty principle. And I was trying to see what would our way be around. And this is what my hope is, that in the next couple of decades, we will evolve and come up with a new model of education. And I must say that I am very happy that Dr. Vikesh Kaur, in her introductory comments, talked about Margaret Mead. Margaret Mead is actually known to be an anthropologist. She was very famous for a work called Coming of Age in Samoa. And she has this quotation that never underestimate the power of a few committed people to change the world. Indeed, that is the way it has always been. And I can give you the examples 100 years ago. All these people like Heisenberg and Max Born and Niels Bohr and Albert Einstein and then Dirac and our own C.V. Raman, whose birthday was celebrating yesterday or so. So all these created a new model. And what I'm saying is now we are going to look to a new model of learning. And the reason is that, as we have already seen, there's no debate on that, that there are many ways in which the old model cannot continue. So I will quickly come to try to tell you what, according to me, are some of the features of the new model. The most important feature of the new model is that learning is now going to be a lifelong affair. And therefore, from stage-based learning, you see everybody is still talking of 16 years of schooling or 18 years of schooling. We are talking of lifelong learning. And as they say in Hindi, Haath Kangan ko RC kya, what are we doing here? None of us is at a school studying age or university going age, but we are actively participating. And as I said, the number of webinars and seminars and things that is going on, I don't have to say that lifelong learning will happen. Lifelong learning is already happening. And this is one of the very, very important things. And traditionally, we talk about Socrates as the one who was the real proponent of lifelong learning. And there's a story about Socrates that many of you know, that he was poisoned. He was sentenced to take poison. And on the night before he was to take the poison, he heard some very interesting tune. And he learned that tune at night. And somebody asked him, what is the point? Tomorrow you're going to die, take poison. Why are you learning something? He says, so that I know one more thing before I die. That was the champion of lifelong learning. Even Bill Clinton, a former president of the US, and in my text I've given a link to his video, he is saying at the age of about 70 that the important thing is that you have to continue learning. And at the age of 70, with a political career behind him, he says that I want to understand particle physics and how does the universe work and so on. I think this is one of the most important things, which is the change that is happening. The practical aspect is that skills of a lifetime become obsolete in an instant. So you may have learned something and you may be doing this for 40 years. One night, it is different. And again, let me give this example. This is what teachers did. Teachers were used to teaching in class, putting 40, 50 children in class, organizing them, teaching them. And suddenly one night they are told that there won't be classes anymore. And they all learned, and you are doing this now routinely and doing so many things, not just the class, the cultural activity, the investiture ceremony, the Independence Day celebration, all kinds of things were done in this manner. And this is not part of NCT curriculum or B.Ed or M.Ed or any such thing. And this is the important point. So lifelong learning, and the second element is self-learning. And self-learning is going to be the other element. And the third element of this is the learning community. It is no longer about just a teacher and a student and the classroom and the syllabus. It is a community of learners. And again, I say that, firstly, that Margaret Mead's quote, which Dr. Vikash Kaur talked about in the beginning, but also that teachers learn from anywhere. They learn from the colleagues, they learn from the children, maybe grandchildren, nephews, whatever. And they didn't say, no, you are not authorized by NCT to teach me how to use Zoom or how to do something on that, and so on and so forth. This is another. So three things that come around: lifelong learning, self-learning or self-directed learning, self-motivated learning, and learning in a community. Now, it's very interesting. Many of you may not know of her, but she was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize in economics. Her name is Elinor Ostrom. She got the Nobel Prize for economics in 2009. Unfortunately, she passed away a couple of years back. She got the Nobel Prize for basically demonstrating, and this is what the citation in the Nobel Prize thing says, that challenging the conventional wisdom that communities cannot do much and it is only the government or the private sector who can do it. And she got a Nobel Prize for demonstrating that if communities take the charge, then it can happen. Now, from what Margaret Mead said as a general exhortation, Elinor Ostrom talked about a learning community that would take charge. And it is my belief that it is the learning community which will drive the future of education, at least the good parts of that education, not the bureaucrats or the business people. And this is why the role of the teacher becomes even more important. And I've tried to say this, many people don't believe me, but I said teachers will be the most important segment of society in the coming decade. And the reason is that when things were settled and established, there wasn't much to teaching. It was basically what has become compliance. Somebody said you have to teach this and then this thing, and then you teach it and assess the exam and so on. But now what are we talking of? We're talking of era of uncertainty. So therefore, there is nobody to prescribe the syllabus. Nobody knows what is going to be required. And therefore, teachers become even more important because the role of the teacher is not just to transmit the curriculum. The role of the teacher is to take an ignorant person, transform him to an informed person, then a knowledgeable person, and then an expert. So it is you who picked up a child at class 1 or 2 who did not know even ABCD 1, 2, 3 or whatever. By the time the person is reaching class 12, it's about physics and chemistry and maths and biology and so on and so forth. That transformational effect of transforming an ignorant person to an informed person, knowledgeable person, and then an expert is the important thing. Now, when we are saying the two things that are happening in the society is complexity, more and more knowledge and information being released, and at a very fast pace. Now, if this is going to happen, there is a lot of number of people who have to be then moved from ignorance to information, knowledge, and so on. At a religious level, this is what Lord Buddha said. He said, all pain is out of ignorance. This is what our ancient tradition, one of the earliest slokes you would have learned is Asatoma, Sadgamaya, Tamsoma, Jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma. Who's going to do this? It's the teacher who's going to do this. So, as we move on to a more uncertain world, the important
Sir, you are on mute, sir.
Okay, now I'm unmuted.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So, okay, thank you for pointing this out. So the point that I'm trying to make is that we talked about earlier learning in school and rest of the things at home. Sometimes you did some homework and so on. Now you're talking about learning at home itself. Actually, both of these are special cases of a third thing, which is learning anywhere. And this is what we are going to see in the post-uncertain world, that you could be learning anywhere. And you must have seen many people while they're going on a train, while they're in the metro, while they're flying, while they're even at a coffee shop, Starbucks, they're doing various things. Learning becomes something which you do everywhere and therefore anytime and therefore all the time. And you need to do learning all the time because of the rapid rate of change that we talked about. One of the important, interesting aspects is that while all these look like challenges, the answer to these challenges have also come up in the emerging technologies of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And therefore, and there's a very nice book which I've recommended to a lot of people in my sessions by Anthony Seldon called The Fourth Education Revolution. He has said that there have been only 3 education revolutions so far, and this is the 4th one that we are talking about. And that AI is something which is going to help the teacher as well as the learner, as well as the self-learner. And therefore, it is very important that teachers embrace AI, learn about AI, and deploy it in their education kind of a scenario so that there is a more effective learning that is going on. Now, when we talk about AI, we're talking about 2 things. We're talking about learning with AI and learning about AI so that you develop AI applications. So this is another very, very important aspect that is there. We'll see a number of other changes that will happen as we go along. And one of the things that comes about is that when you don't know what exactly is going to be needed, there's a very well-known educationist called John Holt, who said, if you don't know what is coming, then the best way is to create an interest in learning and the ability that if you decide to learn something, you will learn it very well, not just to get pass marks or just somehow to get over the exam. You will learn it so that you can say, I know and I know that I know. This is something which is very important. Similarly, another cognitive scientist, educator, Guy Claxton, he has talked about a phrase called learning power. He said the goal of learning, therefore, and the goal of the teacher should be to build learning power in the people. And the analogy he uses is that just like there is muscular power. So if I have good muscular power, I can do all kinds of things. I can push a table, I can ride a bicycle, I can pull water out of a well, I can do some boxing, and so on and so forth. And this is why physical strength was important. That's why you also talked about the youth dividend. Learning power is the ability to learn something quickly. So just like you have muscular power to do all kinds of things, when you have learning power, and Jean Piaget used the expression for this, that if you have learning power, you know what to do when you have not been taught what to do. Very often we say we are taught something, then we can do something. So like you're seeing all this thing, you're going to teach somebody coding or teach somebody programming, and then the person will write a program and so on. Learning power is where you decide that you need to learn this thing. And then, as John Holt says, you learn it very well. So this is another very, very important aspect. And because when we talk about self-learning, therefore then motivation becomes a very important part. Another important part which will happen in the future is the skill of asking questions. So far in traditional education, we have often looking at the right answers to questions which are asked, either in a regular basis by a teacher during normal teaching, formative assessment, or finally in the summative assessment in the exam. We are all used to finding or writing answers to the questions, and we hope if our answer is right, we'll get good marks. More important is the ability to ask questions. And I want to share a famous story. There's lots of literature coming up on, in fact, I use the word questioneering for the skill of asking questions. Just like engineering is the skill of making various things, questioneering is, and it is very important. I mean, suppose you get a chance to speak with somebody and you waste that chance because you don't know what is the kind of question you should be asking. So asking good questions, interpreting them, follow-up questions, making the question better, making it more useful is very, very important. There's a very famous story which is attributed to, again, another physicist, Rabi, who got the Nobel Prize for discovering nuclear magnetic resonance. So when he was asked that, what made you a scientist? He said, my mother made me a scientist. And he said, they asked us, was your mother also a scientist? He said, no, my mother was not a scientist. But every time when I came back from school, and his name was Isabel Rabi, so his mother would say, Izzy, did you ask a good question today? And he said, that ability to ask questions. So this is very, very important. And children are full of questions. There's some research done. A 3-year-old girl asked 300 questions in a day to her mother. And in fact, they say if you ask who's asked the most questions, it's not doctors, it is not lawyers, it is not teachers, it is mothers who are asked the most questions. And 4-year-old are the ones who ask most questions. Gradually, as they grow, they realize there is no point in asking questions, and therefore they stop asking questions. Now, I want to conclude, because I can go on and on, but I think time is to be managed as well. I want to conclude by drawing attention to the fact that the Indian Constitution is probably the only constitution in the world. Not that I have made a comparative study, but yes, as Bhavna said, I've been a lawyer also, and I have an interest in law. Indian Constitution has in its what are called directive principles, Article 51, capital A, and in brackets small h. Now, the directive principles, so like Constitution has fundamental rights, and as you know, the Right to Education Act was passed under that Constitution thing about giving education to all children. This fundamental duty is a duty cast upon all citizens. It is a whole lot of them, but I'm talking of one very small one, 51AH. And it says that it is the duty of every citizen to develop the scientific temper, humanism, and the spirit of inquiry and reform. Look at the thing. One is scientific temper. So you have to look at scientific explanations of things, not other ways of mumbo jumbo and tradition and so on. And science, I just talked to you about Rabi and questioning. Science and questioning go together. And there's no other. See, American Constitution says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But there's a no. You must talk about humanism, spirit of inquiry, and reform. So everything that is being talked about today, innovation, etc., is a part of reform. And the spirit of inquiry is asking good questions, asking meaningful questions, and so on. And scientific temper is updating yourself and what things are happening. So when AI comes, you don't call it magic. You try to understand how it works, what it does, how I can use it. When, as I said, quantum mechanics comes around you, you don't start fighting with it, you start learning it. That is the development of the scientific temper. You try to ask, what is a quantum? How does it work? How is quantum mechanics different from other things? And so on and so forth. So this is something which is very important. As the last parting thing, it's very important, as I said, to know about artificial intelligence and machine learning. And in machine learning, you learn informally later on, but there are basically, what you have is a model, you feed the data to that model, and then you train that model so that in future it can predict. This is how you do human learning as well. You teach and then expect that later on the child who has learned this is able to use that something. Now there are basically 4 methods that we use in machine learning. One is called supervised learning, one is called unsupervised learning, one is called reinforcement learning, and one is called transfer learning. Now the point about the thing is that supervised learning is where you have a data and the person in charge is going to tell you what does it mean. So this is the picture of a cat, this is the picture of a dog, this is the picture of a flower like this is a picture of a flower like this. That is called supervised learning, and you would learn. And this is how most of the learning happens in school. Then we have unsupervised learning, where you really don't say, you just give a set of data and the computer kind of sees patterns within them. This is also part of self-learning. So as I said, there is taught learning and self-learning. Self-learning is where you engage with the information yourself and figure out something. There is reinforcement learning, which is followed by a kind of a reward and punishment manner. You're not told anything, but if what you get is correct, you get a reward. If what you get is not correct, you get a penalty, and therefore you learn how to have the correct behavior. And finally, you have transfer learning, where somebody has already learned something and created a model is given to you so that you can use it. Now, actually, it's very interesting. I don't know when and which slok this is, but there's a very interesting slok which says, Acharya Padmadatte Padam Shishya Sametua Sam Brahmacharya Sam Padam Padam Kalkramera. So this is about how we learn. He says, Pad here is for one of the feet or legs or limbs or whatever. So 1/4 you learn from the teacher, 1/4 you learn from your self-learning, and 1 with your colleagues, and 1 over time. Now, it doesn't say 1/4, 1/4. These are the 4 aspects. So for some cases, teacher factor may be more, self-learning may be less. For some, self-learning may be higher, teacher assistance may be needed less. Some will learn over time with experience, and some will learn from their colleagues. So this was a kind of a glimpse of the ideas that I think will be the learning model, and I call this learning 3-1, learning for the 3rd decade of the 21st century. I have shared these links, and you can always Google. You can go to mmpant.com. This is one of the latest blog. You can go to Twitter at mmpant. You can look for mmpant at Facebook. You can look for mmpant at LinkedIn. And I have also sent these links to Dr. Nayak, and you can get more and more over there. This is a long journey to be done. So like Margaret Mead said, it is not over in a day. This will be the next decade. We'll be working out new models of learning and so on. But what I can say is the future is very bright. The young people who will be adept with these new methods of learning, the new subjects of learning, the new topics of learning, artificial intelligence, machine learning, quantum technologies, they will have a very, very bright future. So my best wishes to both the students and the teachers and all of you. And finally, of course, to Dr. Priyadarshi Nayak for having organized such a wonderful meeting. Thank you.